A performance nutritionist, what does that mean? How does a women's nutritional needs as a whole just differ completely to, say, a male's?
A dietitian can do clinical, they can do public health, they can do sport, they can do food service, and something else. It's like, oh my goodness, South Africa is one of the leaders in sports medicine. And I just love this idea that at that level of performing, where everybody is talented, the small things are what
tiny things,
get you that gold medal, or get you to score that, or get you to recover. Sometimes working with male clients is easier only in the sense that if I say to them, I need you to do this, this, and this, they'll say, yeah, I'll do it. But if I ask a woman to do that, we're very good at putting ourselves at the bottom of the list. Working in the city, working long hours, and you're on the weekend doing triathlons, marathons, etc. So if an athlete needs that much care to be at their best, what more people in the city working and yet also being physically active?
In your experience, what do you think is the biggest kind of barrier to behavior change? And two, if someone lacks that motivation and drive and doesn't know where to kind of dig that out from, what would you say to them?
The common thread is best version of yourself. There's only going to be one or two women, unfortunately, part of that, framework.
Yeah.
They are at the peak of their careers, probably in their 40s or 50s, going through the menopause or perimenopause, when their bodies are most vulnerable. They need even more support. 22% of deaths, mortality worldwide is linked to diet. Could be prevented with diet. Power of nutrition. It is just so underestimated. Our body is like, hey, oh no.
A food item says organic on it, they can just trust that.
I would say you could trust that if it just says organic. That basically just means they can use only 10 pesticides or herbicides. So it's not like it's zero necessarily.
Welcome back to The Mindset. I'm Dr. Veena, and today I'm joined by someone who has many skills that's going to be of use to us. She is an award-winning dietitian and performance nutritionist, a spokesperson for the British Dietetic Association, and has a PhD in public health. I welcome Dr. Linia Patel to The Mindset. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Veena.
I'm so excited. I remember the first time hearing you speak and just being in awe of your knowledge, your confidence, the way you came across, and overall your passion for what you do.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm now suddenly got imposter syndrome, but I definitely am passionate about what I do, and I'm so excited about having this conversation with you.
Thank you. How was your day? I know you've just flown in to be with us.
Exactly. So I just flew in from Milan. I flew in this morning from Milan. It was raining in Milan and it's raining in London.
Same. Great. So because we just talked about the passion, right?
Yeah.
Where does that passion come from for nutrition specifically?
What's so interesting, Veena, is I kind of fell into nutrition. Growing up, I didn't even know that a job as a dietitian existed. So just to give you a little bit of context, I am born, bred and buttered in Zambia. Okay. And my heritage is that I'm half Zambian and half Indian.
Okay.
And I say that only because you'll resonate with this, is that at school, you were kind of pushed into sciences, and with the idea that basically I was either going to be, you'll know it, a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Yeah. Now, as a kid, I was very much an introvert, so being a lawyer was completely out the picture. But I like my sciences. Though I was pushed into my sciences, but I was good at my sciences. And so I kind of wasn't necessarily passionate about whether it would be a medic or engineering, but I kind of followed the science route. And then come my A-levels, I was applying for university places, but, living in Zambia and wanting to go to university in the UK, I had to think of the idea that I had to get a scholarship to come because I was an international student, so the fees were going to be so expensive. So I kind of made a combination of applications, some in engineering and some in medicine. And I kind of said, my mom had said to me, you'll take the one where basically you get the full scholarship. So necessarily, again, wasn't necessarily a choice. It was just like, God, fate would kind of have that way. And I got a scholarship to do chemical engiering.
Not bad.
I got scouted, very early on when I was in my first year A-levels. But actually, I think the holiday just before I was meant to come over, it all fell through.
Oh.
And I was absolutely devastated. But in retrospect, it was literally a blessing in disguise.
It always is, isn't it? Always is.
Because suddenly, obviously, back to the drawing board in a way of actually, what do you want to do? So the adults in my life kind of said to me, take a gap year and kind of take some time to see what you want to do. And, I knew that I wanted to be in science because I loved science and I had done very well in science. And the engineering actually at the back of my head was like, nah, I'm not cut out to be an engineer. So I suppose the one left was kind of medicine or veterinary, because still being an introvert, animals felt easier to cope with than humans.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, my gap year was spent working as a vet assistant in Zambia. And that was so good for me because it opened my eyes to perhaps maybe the naivety that I went in thinking that I was going to be curing cats and dogs and speaking to parrots all day. But actually, the reality is it's very, very different from that. And especially in Zambia, it was very much agricultural veterinary.
Right.
So I got put off being a vet, basically. And then I kind of just like, okay, medicine, that's it. And this time, I applied to actually study at the University of Cape Town, but being Zambian and not South African, South Africa is quite specific with the fact that you can't apply for med school if you're not South African. But the way you do it is basically you do a BSc first, and then you convert. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a plan. So I actually went off, and my first degree is in biochemistry and medicinal chemistry.
Nice.
100% with the idea that I was going to do medicine later. But to do medicine, because it's quite competitive, as you all know, is that you have to be on the Dean's merit list or get distinctions. So I was, putting the hours in, putting the grind in so I could make sure that year in, year out, I was on that list. And probably in my second going to third year, I started getting IBS that I now know of, obviously being a dietitian. But at that time, it just felt like I was having my appendicitis or ulcers or something like that. And a very good family friend from Zambia who was living in South Africa basically said to me, Linia, you have to go see my GP. He's very holistic and he'll kind of sort you out. And, this is maybe 20 years ago. So, even thinking back, thanks, Dr. Sandel, because super, super holistic in his approach, because probably at that point, IBS wasn't even well known. And yet he basically said to me, you're a high achieving student, you're probably stressed. This is linked with stress. And I want you to go see the dietitian. And I went to see the dietitian. She gave me some advice about my nutrition and voila, it really helped. And suddenly I just thought, my goodness, how cool is that actually nutrition can have such an impact on something like that? And actually, the more I looked into it, I was like, wouldn't that be so amazing to be in something that helped you prevent getting the disease, but actually be an active part of healing you and optimizing your well-being once you're sick? And then that summer, before, I was going to make applications to med school because it was kind of coming to that time, I decided to ask my network to basically get me to shadow some dietitians. Because again, I never knew what dietitians did. And so they put me in touch with some dietitians. This is in South Africa. And I remember going to my first shadowing was at the Red Cross Children's Hospital. Now, in South Africa, the Red Cross Children's Hospital in Cape Town is the most specialized children's hospital in the whole of Southern Africa. So you can only imagine the type of cases that come to that hospital. From any clinician's point of view, it is just like, wow, because you just see such fascinating stuff. And the team there, the way they work in such a holistic, integrated way is just incredible. So, obviously after literally probably my first week of working and shadowing the dietitian, I went home every day and I knew deep down in my heart that this is the career that I wanted to do.
What an interesting path.
But then suddenly mad because I'd never looked into it. I'm like, okay, which school does it? And can I use my credits now to kind of go into it? And luckily the University of Cape Town did do dietetics, but it was, again, highly competitive and they only took 8 people every year, and priority went to South Africans. So anyway, I made 2 applications, one for medicine, one for dietetics, and I kind of left it up there to God, the universe. And I got in.
Wow.
And I got in, and so that was a mad, frenetic, compressed 4-year degree into 2 years, and you do an internship, and I became a dietitian, basically. And I guess through that is where my passion kind of grew. It was such an amazing course, and you get such amazing exposure. And in retrospect, should I have known that dietetics existed, I grew up with a mother who had a restaurant, so I was always around food.
Wow.
And my dad actually didn't do med school, but always wanted to do med school. But being the oldest son in the family, and then his dad died, he kind of had to leave and work, right? And so we always had a household filled with these ideas.
Yeah.
Actually, it was very much my passion, but I never knew that you could align passion with work. And so I feel so blessed to basically be in the zone where I am literally doing my passion and I get paid for it.
Oh, well, I love that for you. And you're so right, because unless you've seen someone do it, you have a network where someone puts the idea, incepts you have a point of reference. How does a child or a young person know?
Yeah.
Right? Your parents only guide you with what they best think is
Yeah.
the correct thing for you. How would you have known?
Yeah.
But I'm so glad this kind of fell in.
Yeah.
And a performance nutritionist, what does that mean?
Okay, so performance nutritionist comes from kind of being a sports dietitian. So I graduated from dietetics, and I wanted to specialize. And you know, again, my world opened, because again, naturally you would think, because I wanted to do medicine, I'd go into clinical dietetics, working in a hospital.
Yeah.
But actually the exposure that course gave me was a dietitian can do clinical, they can do public health, they can do sport, they can do food service. And suddenly I was just like, oh my goodness. And, you know, South Africa is one of the leaders in sports medicine. And I was so privileged, again, to work to have been able to do my internship in the Sports Institute of South Africa.
Wow.
Working with, again, multidisciplinary team of exercise physiologists, biokineticists, and sports doctors. And again, open my eyes to the fact that nutritionists have a role there. And I just love this idea that at that level of performing, where everybody is talented, the small things are what
tiny things,
get you that
yeah.
gold medal, or get you to score that, or get you to recover. And I guess a performance nutritionist basically works as part of a multidisciplinary team to help the person in front of them be the best version of themselves. So I started off working in high performance sport, came over to London, and in London, basically that kind of started pivoting to become more looking after corporate athletes.
Got it.
Because, you know, working in London, at the time, we were working in just sport, but my boss at the time had friends who were obviously, heading up banks and things like that, who would come into our performance lab for favors in terms of testing and things like that. But actually just started realizing that these people are working in the city, working long hours, and you're on the weekend doing triathlons, marathons, etc. So if an athlete needs that much care to be at their best, what more people in the city working and yet also being physically active? And so now actually the majority of my work is working with corporates.
Corporates, yeah. That's where I think when I first heard you speak, it was to a corporate audience as well. So what kind of athletes did you work with?
So before, all sorts, really, football players, Formula One, cricket, runners, triathletes, divers, you name it.
All like a whole breadth.
A whole breadth, but with the common thread is best version of yourself.
Got it.
And in my corporate work, mostly, what I've been focusing on is people who are at the peak of their careers, particularly, and this is where my passion for women's health comes in, because as a high performance nutritionist, you're always looking for ways to help your clients or your athletes be better. And so sometimes that would mean that if I had a woman athlete, I was having to do extra work to try and find out what the protocols, strategies were for that athlete. And when I would go back to the research or my textbooks for the answers, or to look at whether there were studies done specifically on women, there weren't many. So as a clinician, you spend more time trying to understand how you can work with the physiology of the clients in front of you. And then you become more interested in how small tweaks and changes are actually having an impact. So that's how my initial interest in women's health came to be. And then more so when you take it to corporate, is I would see, say if I'm looking after the C-suite of a bank, there's only going to be one or two women, unfortunately, part of that, framework.
Yeah.
They are at the peak of their careers, probably in their 40s or 50s, going through the menopause or perimenopause when their bodies are most vulnerable. So they need even more support. And yet what I tend to find, which I find fascinating, is that, sometimes working with male clients is easier only in the sense that if I say to them, I need you to do this, this, and this, they'll say, yeah, I'll do it. But if I ask a woman to do that, we're very good at putting ourselves at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
You know, and so actually really empowering my women to say, hold on, your body is vulnerable at this point in time because physiologically you've got higher levels of baseline cortisol, your inflammatory markers are slightly higher. So you need to prioritize looking after yourself so that you have gas left in the tank to give out. And from that place is basically they can be in their kind of performance zone.
You know, I'm laughing internally as you say this, because even to get here, I had to skip grabbing a bite, and now my stomach is rumbling. I was like, I'm speaking to a top nutritionist today and I've literally not eaten anything. Is this the best thing to do, V? And that's why I was just laughing in my mind.
If I can help, I always carry snacks with me, so I can offer you some
No,
snacks.
No, I'm good. It was just making me laugh when you're talking about women putting themselves last, and it's not just in the work. You see, even women who might not be in corporates, who might just be running a household, who might just have a lot of children. Absolutely. You know, getting straight to the meat of it, shall we? How does a women's nutritional needs as a whole just differ completely to, say, a male's?
You know, and that's a fantastic question. And it's one that we're understanding more now because we're trying to do a little bit more research. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
But we're physiologically very, very different.
Absolutely.
And, you know, you're a medic, so you'll know that a woman's kind of lifespan is delineated into certain frames, you know. So one could be you start your period, so after menstruation, then you kind of, you know, from your 20s to your 30s, and from your mid-30s, there are changes in hormones. You might not physically feel it, but they're happening. And then from your 40s, you're perimenopausal, which is the period around the menopause. And then the average age of the menopause in the UK and the USA is 51. And so then we've got the menopause and then we've got postmenopause. And so we've got all these different phases, and between that, you know, when we are having a regular menstrual cycle, there's fertility, there's perhaps being pregnant, or, you know, post-pregnancy. So there's so many different dynamics. So I guess the answer to that question is depends where you are in that phase of that lifespan. How I, as a performance nutritionist, I'm going to look after you, and how I'm going to prioritize what I do for you as well.
Okay, so if I just use myself as an example, so if you're in your 30s and you're working, active with sports, you know, you're at home doing your general things, what could I do, or where should I look at in my diet to think I need some improvement?
Well, the first thing I would say is I would want to know a little bit more about you. You know, what's your normal you? What's your normal energy levels? What's your normal digestive health? What's your normal mood like? What's your normal libido like? What's your normal concentration? So the more I learn about you, the more perhaps you can say, well, Linia, I actually feel tired all the time. Maybe my periods are a little bit out of whack. I've got terrible PMS, you know. I'm working with some people who are consultants at one of the top firms at the moment, and you know, they're young consultants who are under pressure all the time, and what I'm seeing is very common themes around perhaps issues around menstrual cycle, either not getting them or menstrual cycle really suffering with PMS. And so I would be asking you things like, you know, what do you want to achieve? What are your pain points? From those pain points, I can then say, okay, let's start finding out what your baseline is. And then I would be asking you, like, you know, I'd be asking you to keep a food diary. I'd be perhaps doing some comprehensive tests on you, perhaps bloods, to understand, you know, whether there are some nutrient deficiencies or not. And then from all of that information, you know, I collect information to learn a little bit more about your physiology. Once I understand what you're eating, what your current eating patterns are, I then can use my clinical expertise to basically say, okay, you're a busy woman, Veena. So I'm not going to say, well, wake up at 5 a.m. and soak your almonds and you know, make your own almond milk. And, you know, I hope that you made that mother for your sourdough bread last night. You know, that's unrealistic. So basically working with where you're at. And for me, the key aspect of nutrition is personalization. That's exactly what I would always do for my sporting athletes. And that's what I would do for any client, is the idea that give you advice that suits you, your circumstances, your goals, your objectives, in a way that is healthy, nourishing for you, and in a way that you build rituals and lifelong habits that stick with you. So I'm in public health, you know, so prevention runs through my blood. And I'm all about that. And, you know, I'll give again the idea of the menopause. It's 50 when you're 51, but actually science shows that how you live, move, sleep in your late 30s is a game changer for how you transition through that. I'm in my early 40s. I so want to be rocking it through my 40s. And so I'm going to be even more, I want to be proactive with making sure that I get my lifestyle right, so that actually in the peak of my career, which I'm in now, that I'm continuing to thrive as I move through this transition.
I love that.
Changing the narrative.
Yeah. And I think, you know what you said about prescribing exactly what's unique to the person in front of you, because even as a doctor, when you tell a patient something, it's one thing telling them, but unless they're going to comply or unless they can relate to it, they're not going to change anything. And behavior change is so difficult on so many levels. In your experience, what do you think is the biggest kind of barrier to behavior change?
Well, it depends again. You know, I'm very fortunate to work with athletes and high performers. So actually they come, you know, they're their dream. They're sometimes a dream, you know, because sometimes I have to be like, okay,
enough change. That's
you know, because they're over, you know, so finding a way to also regulate their nervous system so that this doesn't become another stress. So I'm lucky that tends to happen. But I know, you know, working in public health, you know, we're in an obesity epidemic at the moment. And, you know, I know I've worked on the ground in public health where we've had so many different interventions to help people eat healthier. And I worked as a diabetes dietitian for so many years. And I would sit in clinic and get so many DNAs, which did not turn up to appointment. And I just couldn't understand because, you know, somebody has got a chronic condition. And here I am eager to help and give you some tools. And yet they don't come for their appointments. And so, you know, I think that there's so many different barriers and obstacles. And, you know, the philosophy in public health is always to do a needs assessment. What is most important to that person at that point? Because if I meet the thing that's most important in your hierarchy of needs at that point, then if I'm working with you on your agenda, I can bring my agenda to the table and then we can find a common ground. And so I think that's really important to always go back to the personalization.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. Not everyone knows that diet and nutrition can have such a big impact on the disease process, on your general well-being.
Huge.
They think medication might be the answer or something else, and then adding on diet right as a last resort. That's what we see in end-stage disease anyway. When do we send someone to a nutritionist or a dietitian is, or their kidneys are failing, or their liver is not good, or, you know, they're on immunosuppressants. Whereas you're right, when you're working with high-performing individuals, the needs are different, aren't they?
And I just want to drop a stat there. So 22% of deaths, mortality worldwide is linked to diet. Could be prevented with diet. And that's bigger than any, it's wild. You know, so the power of nutrition, I mean, it is just so underestimated. And it's, you know, obviously I'm a dietitian, so I'm going to say this, it's an easy one to get right, but you need to be empowered with the right tools, because I think sometimes, especially now, we've got so much information out there. There's these influencers saying, this is what I eat in a day. There's celebrities saying, you got to follow my diet, you know, and so it can become confusing to really know exactly what you should be doing. And I think that whilst, you know, I think nutrition should be easy, I think it's actually really complicated because
it's very complicated. And I have some understanding of science and the body, and I find it complicated. So I can only imagine what the average person finds. And exactly like you, I think I have a big passion for health promotion and kind of tackling misinformation on the internet. So if someone's listening in today and they don't know where to start, Linia, what would you say to them? How can we break down just the basic building blocks of nutrition for them?
So I'm going to be assuming that lots of women are going to be listening to us. I'm going to focus on women. I would say, you know, start by getting to know you. So perhaps start by tracking your cycle as a start. Okay. So there's so many different applications out there. So it could be Flow or Wild AI, etc. So track your cycle, because your cycle is an indicator that your hormones are working for you or not. From a nutritional point of view, I find a lot of mistakes that women make is, number one, they don't eat enough. Now, women in their reproductive years are much more sensitive to energy intake than men. And that's because in our what we call hypothalamic axis, which is basically the master controller of what regulates your hormones, we have more neuropeptides called kisspeptin, which means that actually if we follow fad diets, our body is like, hey, oh no, not enough energy is coming into Linia. And hey, if she falls pregnant, we know falling pregnant is an energy demanding process, and then carrying the baby and then giving birth. So it will downregulate some hormones. And so your menstrual cycle is a fantastic telltale sign of whether you've got your energy balance right, you're eating enough and you're not moving too much, and also the quality of your nutrition. So track your cycle.
Yeah.
Then I would say, get to know you in terms of your symptoms. So what is your baseline? And I would say, your 20s, 30s are really good time to kind of get that, normal energy levels, normal PMS levels, normal libido, normal concentration. What does that look like? And then if you feel like you want to be a better version of you, what does that look like? And then I would say, at some point in time, invest in some personalization in terms of the advice. That's key. And I see that in terms of, if you were to say to me, what are the key take-home messages from looking after athletes, both sporting and corporate, I would say what they're very good at is developing micro habits and rituals, but that are individual to them. So there is not one high-performing methodology that will get you, Veena, into your top zone. You have got to experiment and find what works for you.
Absolutely.
And athletes and top performers are always open and willing to do that because they want to be better versions of themselves.
Yep.
And so that aspect comes with someone helping support you, perhaps having some physiological markers to go with in terms of bloods and things like that.
Yep.
We're both wearing, I'm wearing a ring at the moment, which tells me a lot about me in terms of my sleep and stress levels, etc. All of that information can be used to harness my power.
Okay. So that's where someone could start from.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really insightful on many levels. One, it makes someone look at their lifestyle and actually be accountable. I think this is, again, something I find challenging in clinic when I see patients across the board. Yes, when you're working with very high functioning individuals, like you said, they come with that accountability. They come with wanting to do those things. If someone doesn't have that motivation, you come across to me as someone so motivated and so confident. One, have you always been like this? And two, if someone lacks that motivation and drive and doesn't know where to kind of dig that out from, what would you say to them?
Brilliant question. And I'm on the Mindset podcast, so I will probably say mindset is a big thing. I think that one of probably, I suppose, my greatest attributes is that I have a good mindset in terms of being proactive. And I think that comes from having an amazing mother. I was raised by a single mother who was hardworking and resilient and really passed on that kind of proactive mindset. So absolutely have that, and I don't take it for granted. No. But I think for me, the other point of view is outside of my work, my faith is a big part of what I do and who I am. And I like to look at things in a holistic way. Performance nutrition is about looking at things in a holistic way. So you got body, mind, soul, spirit. So I would probably say that you've got to learn to nurture all of you, whether that's body, that's mind, so perhaps mindset is part of that, and your soul as well. And so, nutrition is one part of it. Make sure you stay hydrated. Make sure you're eating the right type of carbohydrates. You've got protein on the plate, fruit and vegetables. We can never eat enough of those, and all of those guidelines. But I think sometimes we focus so much on the physical, we forget the other bits. So I would say, this is not about getting everybody to kick ass. Not everybody is a type A personality that's a go-getter, and that's okay. This is not about comparing. But, if I asked most people out there, do you want to be a better version of yourselves? Do you want to show up as the best version of yourself in your relationships, in your work, in just day-to-day? Most people would say yes, right? And so that's what performance nutrition is about. It doesn't have to be hardcore and scary. It can actually just be, no matter what walk of life you come from, if you're wanting to optimize you physically, mentally, spiritually, or in a holistic way, how can you nourish yourself? So nourishing yourself physically is seeing someone like me, not a psychologist, not a shrink. So I can't really do the other bits, but I can refer and signpost. I'm aware, I can ask the questions to get you thinking. But, an important part of the process of when I work is I get people to do a discovery call with me. But before they do the discovery call, I get them to answer some questions to ascertain where on the motivation of 1 to 10 they are. Because, I also want to be working with motivated people. you don't have to be at 8, 9, 10.
No.
But I want you to be willing and open to be coachable.
Yeah.
Because that will be rewarding for you, and it will make the most use of my clinical expertise.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's true, because if there's resistance, how are you going to take in that knowledge? How are you going to impart the change? And I think I've actually had this with patients where they put fixed labels on themselves. Oh, I'm just lazy, or I just struggle to do that. I'm like, but how do you know? And then you change their lifestyle a little bit, and they're like, oh, I used to think I didn't have energy, but now I do. All they had to do was cut down the gluten or cut down the sugar.
Yeah.
And it's like your own definition of who you are changes, right?
Yeah, I love that. Love that example. And really good analogy is water and hydration. You know, sometimes the advice that I would give is, you need to drink more water.
Right.
You know, and it sounds so simple, and sometimes it's like, really? Is that all you're telling me to do? But you will not know how many people go through life mildly dehydrated. And actually, our body is 70% water. And our mind and our brain is 80, 85%. And so if we want to think clearer, sharper, remember things, we need to be hydrated. Otherwise, those chemical messages ain't going to go nowhere. They're going to be really, really slow. And what tends to happen is, once you get in a really good hydration habit, as soon as you become slightly dehydrated, you're more sensitive to it. I'm feeling slightly dehydrated, so I'm going to drink.
This is making me thirsty, not just hungry. Everyone listening, I just want everyone to know, after this conversation, I'm going to go and eat a big meal. No, I love that. And I think from what you're saying, something as simple as that, often it's the simple things that we ignore, and we all want one big blanket statement or a big magic cure, but it's often going back to the drawing board and thinking, what is that one simple thing we can do?
Yeah, love that. And that works really well in behavior change. So I think James Clear, Atomic Habits, is this idea that small steps, big change. In fact, I literally emailed one client that today. She came to see me, 30-year-old, really, working in the city, struggling with energy levels, up for a promotion, but just feels that she can't even keep up with the pace at the moment. So how's that going to work for her? So energy levels was the reasons why she came to see me. And, there's lots of things going on. We found out she's anemic and things like that, but we're kind of sorting that out. But I keep on saying to her, it's the small things. So I want you to do all these 10 small things, because those are going to add up to make the big difference. Yeah. And so, doing 1% of something every day adds up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Micro habits.
I'm interested to get your view on some things that are like up and about in the media these days, right? And everyone's got a view on it. Like you said, on the internet, everyone's, preaching and teaching everybody. Where do you stand with the whole Ozempic wave for weight loss? Not for diabetics, for weight loss.
Okay, complicated. Okay, so I'm pro-choice. Yeah. So I think that everybody, should have a choice, but everybody should have an informed choice. There's no such thing as a free lunch ever in life. And so if you choose to take Ozempic, that's fine, as long as you're supported by a health professional in a way that is healthy and balanced. But it has consequences with it, right? And I suppose as long as you are aware of those, then fine. I mean, if somebody is taking it to lose weight because they have other risk factors like high blood pressure or diabetes, obviously more warranted. If a Hollywood celebrity with a body fat already of 20 is taking it to lose a little bit of weight, that's not the best way to do it. And the thing is with all these things, we don't have long-term data. Right? I know. So we don't know, in like 20 years, are the researchers going to be saying, oh my goodness, what scientists were allowing this drug on the market? And that's my whole thing, even with health policy and nutrition policy. My PhD initially was going to be on menopause, but I couldn't do it on menopause because we didn't have enough data. Then I kind of switched to artificial sweeteners and trying to look to the idea of, if we have so much artificial sweeteners in the food system, does that change our habits on a public health level? I couldn't really answer that because we didn't have enough data yet, because I asked the question too early. Yeah. So we needed a little bit more time, and so I'm super curious to find out, what impact maybe, some of these things that we're trialing now will have in the future. Yeah, no, I think that's very well put. And coming from an expert, guys, I completely back that, and I second that, because everyone wants that prescribed, but there's a reason why, at least on the NHS, why we give it to a certain group of people. Yeah.
so as not to just have like an easy shortcut for this.
Yeah.
The second one I wanted to ask you about was intermittent fasting. What do you think of intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fasting is so controversial, interesting, and complicated. And what I would say is that, as everything in nutrition, there's a time and a place and a context. But what I tend to find in my clinical practice is that it's taken off the shelf and everybody is doing it. And, they're doing it perhaps when they're a woman in their reproductive years, perhaps leaving too much of a big energy deficit, and that's having an impact on their periods.
Okay.
Not to say that women can't do it, but again, it needs to be done in the context. Or perhaps they're doing it, but it becomes feast and famine, and if we're doing it, the research actually does show that actually when done in the right context, it does help in terms of some physiological markers like, your fasting insulin or triglycerides or, things like that. So we know that there are some clinical benefits. In terms of weight loss, it's not better than all the other ones. If it works for you, it might work, but same reducing your portions might work for you. So it's not superior. So my message always with intermittent fasting is it has to be context specific and it has to be done properly. If not done properly, it can be a stress on the body. And, if you are busting gut to pay your ever increasing mortgage, if you are not sleeping and if you are, training for marathons and not fueling well, and then you add intermittent fasting onto that, that's not nourishing your body. Your body's going to break down. But if I'm super zen, I'm relaxed, I'm in the first part of my menstrual cycle, then, I could dabble with it. My message actually with intermittent fasting is leaving a little bit of a gap, 12 hours between dinner and breakfast is a good idea for most people. So maybe start with that. And then if you want to dabble with the rest, particularly if you're a woman in your reproductive years, then get the personalized.
And I think what you said about the feast and famine, that's a really good point, because there's no point doing that fast and then having a huge takeout, isn't it? It's about the right nutrition as well.
Exactly.
There are lots of young women and men who battle with, self-image, battle with food being the enemy, as often told, or, they might almost punish themselves, see themselves as not eating much or eating less. Where could they begin to just educate themselves about what is good food for them?
Great question, and complicated one to answer, because you've mentioned a number of things there. You've talked about the kind of the physical nutrition bits about nourishing, and you've also talked about self-image, which is probably more the psychology of self-esteem and things like that. So maybe let me tackle the first, which is the physical nourishment. So I would say, I would challenge everybody to think of themselves as an athlete. Because what I love about athletes is they have that hunger and that mindset to nourish their body in a way that means it can be their best performing self.
And this is for the average person. Doesn't matter what you're doing.
No,
see
totally,
yourself.
because at the end of the day, we're all wanting to be better versions of ourselves. We don't have to be, racing in the Olympics or anything like that. If you are, I'm just trying to shift the mindset to say, fuel and nourish like an athlete, because they're very, very good with nourishing themselves, getting everything right, having that nap so that they have their recovery, really looking after their body so that they can be in the best form or shapes. And I would say, where you look for nutrition advice is really important. Yes. Because everybody now has an opinion on nutrition, whether it's your personal trainer, the influencer, or your grandmother. And it's hard to know who to trust. And, more respect to you being a medic, but, you're now getting so many medics who had 2 hours of nutrition, basically dashing out nutrition advice,
I wouldn't even dabble in that area.
Trust, because it's like, trust your doctor. And so sometimes it's kind of just like, some of the advice that they're giving is like, no, so trust the nutrition experts. I would, obviously this is through a bias and because I'm a dietitian, but I just know that, we spend 4 years at university. And so I would say, trust people like, British Dietetic Association, Nutrition Society, so use established bodies that are expert in nutrition for advice. And yet, I'm also very holistic in the way that I approach things. I would say, not to say that you can't look to medics for advice, but be a critical thinker.
Absolutely.
And this is the thing about being a scientist that I love, is that I'm constantly questioning. That is my job as a scientist. I never take anything at face value, and I'm always questioning. And in general, in nutrition, you can argue one way or another. And I would say someone who's very fixated in ideology, I would be questioning that sometimes, because nutrition is very gray. It's not black and white. And so you should be open, even as a clinician, I say this to myself all the time, should be open to hear the other point of view and perhaps understand what works best for the person in front of me.
Yeah. No, I think that's really well put, actually, for people where to start. So really taking a step back, your mindset, going to like trusted resources, and we'll put some down below so you can have a look as well, because I wouldn't even dare dabble in that area because there's so much. Because you've just mentioned that, I once had a patient who was a diabetic patient, end-stage renal failure, went to some fad person who said they were a nutritionist. I think they had some course, like you said, a couple of hours online somewhere, put this patient on a high-protein diet, and their kidneys were completely shot by the end of that, because all the protein obviously gets processed via the kidneys, and they ended up on dialysis. So it's quite dangerous if we don't do this correctly, right?
No, definitely. And even in the nutrition world, there's dietitians who can do prevention and help once you've got a chronic disease or any disease. Then there's nutritionists, registered nutritionists, who should just be doing prevention. And then within that, that there's kind of nutritional therapists. So even within the nutrition world, it's like, know who can be doing what,
And not everybody knows
and not everybody knows the difference between the nutrition professionals, So I'd always say, go with registered individuals as a trusted source, and, question. Be curious, question any advice that you get. Don't just take it for face value.
Yeah. Organic food is meant to be the healthier option, less chemicals, grown properly, gives you the most nutritional value, so is said. What's your view on that? Would you agree?
I've changed my view on this. If you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have said no difference. But since then, we've got a little bit more research in the idea of looking at specific things to say, okay, are the phytonutrients, which are basically the plant compounds that are going to be good for us, are they higher in organic food or not? Is there more pesticide residue on organic food or not? And, there was recently some systematic reviews and meta-analysis, which is basically you're pooling together all the scientific research, which basically concluded that, organic food did have higher phytochemicals and nutrients, and did also come with less pesticides and herbicides. Wow. But organic food is more expensive. Okay, so again, it comes back, Veena, to very much where are you on this journey of nutrition? If I can't even get you to eat enough fruit and vegetables, please eat some berries, eat some kale. I don't care where it comes from, but eat it and get in a habitual way of eating it, and eat balanced before you start thinking of buying that one packet of organic apples.
I'm learning so much already from this dialogue. Thank you. And to anyone listening today, if they're already on a budget and they're struggling, but they want to try something organic, is there any particular source you'd advise them to go to? Or if a food item says organic on it, they can just trust that?
I would say you could trust that if it just says organic, because it is quite a stringent process here. I mean, that basically just means they can use only 10 pesticides or herbicides. So it's not like it's zero necessarily, but it's much less than the conventional. And I would say the other tip is that where are you on this life stage? Because at certain life stages, for me, quality of what you take in is more important. Perhaps around fertility, perhaps when you're pregnant, or, lactating, and menopausal. Because, you got more pressure on your body then, and your body is more vulnerable. So there are definitely points in a woman's journey when perhaps looking at things like that becomes more pertinent. But again, if you're working with a health professional, they can guide you through that. And they can also say to you, hey, Veena, at this point in time, that's not your biggest battle. At this point in time, your biggest battle is eating your snack before you come podcast.
No, I love that. Thank you. I feel like we've touched upon so many different topics, and I've learned so much even in the short time sitting with you. I can only imagine the wealth of information you'd give someone if you were training them on a personal level. So thank you for your time, Linia. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I would now like to go into a very easy, chill, rapid fire. Okay. First answers that come to your mind, just so our viewers can get to know you a bit more.
Bring it on.
Your go-to snack?
Nuts and a piece of fruit.
Okay.
But when I'm traveling, usually nuts and maybe some dates.
Okay. Your cheat meal, if there's one?
Ooh, depends on my mood. I am a lover. I'm a carb lover, and I love potatoes. So it has to involve triple fried potatoes.
Wow.
I'm sure.
When you said carb love, I was hoping you'd go towards rice, but fine. Okay.
Oh, really? Yeah. You would think it would be rice, because obviously grew up in a lot of rice and also in Shimo, which is Zambian food. But actually, potatoes are my thing. I think because they're so versatile. Daphnoise potatoes or deep fried potatoes, yum.
I'm so hungry. I'm joking. Best meal someone has made for you?
Ooh, any meal someone makes for me is just amazing.
Stop.
No, well, I think it's just because if it's done with love, it's just so nice, right? Because it's an act of love. It is. No, I mean, but I'm trying to think maybe the last meal that I remember that being super, super memorable. I think it was at Easter, and I went to see my godmum, and I ordered before I flew Zambian food.
Wow.
And it's kind of like and Zambian food takes quite a while to cook because it's lots of slow cooked stews and things like that. And made the order in Milan and landed, and she delivered. So so that definitely, eating food that comes from home is like literally putting a warm blanket around you with a hot water bottle and hot chocolate on the, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Are you a big cook?
Love cooking. Food is my life, Ina. I grew up with a mum who had a restaurant, a fusion restaurant, a Zambian Indian.
Wow.
So I was frying samosas at like 4 years old. Probably not health and safety here in the UK, but in Zambia it's okay. Yeah. So no, I love cooking. It's my therapy as well in terms of
That's
relaxing.
what I say. That's my one thing I do to relax, cook.
Yeah.
There's something really therapeutic about it, I think.
Podcast and cook.
Oh,
I am in my
it.
happy space.
Note to self, get a kitchen in here later. Common misconception about healthy eating.
Common misperception. Oh, that's a good one. It's boring.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, that's the most common one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I like tasty food.
Yeah, exactly. Vegetables, boring. Yeah.
Worst ingredient for our diet as humanity.
Ooh, I would never just pick one, because you know what? The research shows it's all about dietary pattern. So, you might think that an apple is a healthy food, but if you ate apples all day, every day, and that's all you ate, it would soon become unhealthy food. So there's no such thing as a good or bad food.
So not even something like sugar, fat, because we need it.
No.
Yeah.
I would say it's the dietary pattern of it. So how often are you doing it?
Amazing. And your words of advice for someone looking to become a nutritionist?
Go for it. It's a fantastic career, but it's a hard career, and I actually won't kind of sugarcoat it. And I would say be very specific what type of nutrition you want to go into. There's dietetics, there's nutrition, or there's nutritional therapy. So, do your research about which type you kind of want to go into. And yeah, it's such a rewarding career because it's you get to help people to be healthy. And if you're a foodie, you kind of bring it all together. But it's also a hard one to find jobs in. The reality is that easier as a dietitian, because obviously you're a health professional, so you can obviously find jobs in the NHS and things like that. So a lot of people are doing the freelance thing as nutritionists. But given that every influencer thinks that they're a nutritionist, that's also becoming hard as well. So absolutely go for it. But do your homework, do your research.
Yeah, and just going back to what you just said, they're charging people, they're selling things, I'm just like, how are you selling? With what confidence are you selling things to people? Yeah, it's scary. It honestly scares me.
Insane.
Yeah,
insane.
Thank you so much for that. That was okay. That was quite chill. Who is your support system when you're going through tough times? When you're being that athlete of life, who do you lean back on?
I'm African, so I love the analogy of you have to have a village. Yeah. And I 100% have a village around me. Absolutely do. I'm so, so, so incredibly blessed. I grew up in Zambia and I went to boarding school. And so a lot of my friends that are around me now actually are friends that I've had my whole life, which is such a gift. But along the way, I've met other amazing, wonderful people. So I just got to have the best family and friend support network. And they are literally what replenish my bucket and fill me up, because I'm a high achieving woman, I'm a high performing woman, so I have a lot of going out, but absolutely rely on my village to replenish me. So I suppose the thing I would say with that is find your village.
Find your village. It's so inspiring.
Find your tribe.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes it's you find them in the most unexpected places.
Absolutely.
But you get people who you just connect with and that are just meant to be aligned to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Linia. That was amazing. Would you like to tell our viewers where they can find you and how they could reach you if they wanted to?
Absolutely. So I am on Linia Nutrition, and I can't remember all my handles off the top of my head, but if
I'll put it down below.
So my name is very unique. There's only very few Linia Patels out there. So if you put Linia Nutrition, you'll find me on both Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Linia, thank you so much for your expertise, your knowledge, and sharing your story with us. I think this is definitely going to inspire people, if not to learn a bit more about their body and nutrition, but also to look into what you do and see if they can kind of align with what you're doing as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach Linia directly or write them down below, and we'll do our best to answer them. Linia, thank you so much for your time on The Mindset.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very honored to come because I know you've had some amazing guests. So thank you for asking me, having me, and asking such thought-provoking questions. I've really, really loved our conversation.
Oh no, you've been amazing. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.